Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Extended Innovation Summit, the Unlocking of the Lockdown, Inclusion and Diversity Matters 2020. We are on our extended episode 2, Accelerating Change, the Future of Work and Collaboration. And I'm going to first introduce myself and tell you a bit about my background. So my name is Susan Falola, and I am CEO Creative Director of JUUBIX. JUUBIX is a multi-sector fintech solution, a back-end matrix that can be used as a white label for existing platforms to offer expertise such as Fiverr, Upwork, LinkedIn, and in terms of investment, Crowdcube, Kickstarter, Seeders, and in terms of projects, Startup Grind, Crunchbase. We connect those anonymously based on match criteria and pulling all of those resources by sector with common values and interests. JUUBIX calculates the overall liquidity of the network and actually makes a robust ecosystem for innovation. And I'm joined here today by some formidable speakers. So I would first like to introduce Genevieve. So if you could give a brief introduction, Genevieve.
Yes, thank you very much, Susan. I'm Genevieve, and I'm the CEO of ArgriLedger, and we are using the blockchain technology to look at the democratization of access to both market and financial services for producers.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. Can we hand it over to Adewole to give a brief introduction? Oh, you need to take yourself off mute, Adewole. Thank you.
My name is Adewole. I work as a solution architect in the financial sector, working mainly on big data technologies and cloud technologies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Adewole. And I'll hand it over to Lubna to now give a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Lubna Dajani. I'm a systems architect by education. My focus has been on, throughout my career, on innovation and the use of technology to simplify the experience rather than add to the clutter of it. And yeah, my company now is called The Alternate, and I'm driving a movement called the Kind Human movement.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Lubna. And last but not least, Kashmira. Could you give a brief introduction, please?
Hi, I'm Kashmira Mody, and I'm an India-based transformation coach. And for the last 14 years, I've worked with companies, entrepreneurs, small and medium enterprises. That's really my sweet spot, helping them explore and experience success and significance. And when I talk about significance, I talk about discovering and then powering by your vision, your value, your unique area of genius. And I'm just so chuffed to be here today. So thank you for having me, Susan.
Thank you. And actually, I want to just let Mukta give a brief introduction, right? So even though he's not going to be taking part as much as he did previously, I'd like to give him the chance to give an introduction. Mukta, are you there?
Yes. Thank you very much, Susan. Yes, hi everybody. My name is Mukta Mahmood. I'm one of the co-founders of Newny. Newny is the audience engagement and community platform that the majority of you would have come through. And yeah, so it's an interactive platform. You can use it, for that Q&A session later on. If you have any questions, just pop it over there, and then we can address them later on. And you can also keep up with any information regarding this JUUBIX events on Newny as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think Mukta has kindly put the link for everybody to access the new platform. So we're going to start off today by giving Genevieve a 5-minute allowance to give a brief overview about the topic in question, just so that everybody can actually get some kind of understanding where we are at today. So Genevieve, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, so Susan, so one of the things we were talking about today earlier is really how COVID is changing the way we work. But I think it's just accelerating what was already on the way. If we look at how we receive our services, we now have things like Uber We also have, even though it's not doing so well lately, the Airbnb. So we have been changing how we access, and the internet and access of data and information has made it too much more reachable. And if we look at the penetration of technology in terms of communication, cell phone, it is maybe, I would say, at less than 10% of the world does not have access to some sort of cell phone, adult that is. So what that does is that through technology, it allows now for us to be able to be much more connected without having to be in the same places, which means when it comes to work, you can now get your talent from just about anywhere in the world without ever having to be in the same room as they are, which also does put, however, a challenge on how you work. How do you communicate? How do you create community? And I would suggest that this has become a challenge for many of the companies which have been affected by COVID. How are they going to bring back the workers and create that sense of community? It is not by basically forcing everyone to report in, but it's creating that communication pathway. How do you get people to ask questions where it's not in email, because email can be intrusive, or even, like WhatsApp chat don't work. So what are the tools that are needed? What are the data that needs to be shared, and how are we going to go about it? Now, the work I've been doing has been working with smallholder farmers. And again, one of the biggest issues, a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to the FAO talking about the state of nutrition and food. And it was dismal. When we look at SDGs, and in case people are not aware of the SDGs, that is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The first one is the end of poverty. The second one is zero hunger. They talked about that actually in the last 10 years, it's gone the wrong way. There are 60 million more people who are food deprived in the world. And from 2019 to 2020, it was 10 million. And with the COVID crisis, they're expecting that to be 100 million more added to those ranks. The fundamental problem also, that is 370 million children who no longer have access to a good meal. That was the only meal that they were having, which means you're going to have susceptibility to diseases such as measles. You will have stunting, which means they will not grow. And we also know it's not only the mental pain of hunger which keeps you from being happy, but hunger does also reduce the ability to learn. So we need to look at ways to really mitigate those by really looking at how do we empower those people, and how do we create a mechanism whereby farming is not seen as a low-level career path. And that is really going to be more in places like Africa and Asia, where we have so much more youth. And what most people don't realize is that the smallholder farmers are actually feeding over 50% of the world. So using technology and breaking, we have all the pieces together. And that's where we at the beginning of the year, or 2019, a lot of people were talking about the 4 Eyes, which is the innovative parts of technology. It's really putting those to the test. And what COVID has shown us is we can, because so many of us across the world are working from home and still being able to communicate. So if we can communicate from home, why can't a farmer communicate, come and pick up my stuff? Why can't he receive a digital payment? Why does he have to have cash? Why can he not be able to transfer those funds? And this is not about crypto. Why can he not use a digital representation the same way we do? Because when you do that payment with your phone, with your iPhone or your Android phone, you're actually hitting your bank account. So which means everyone should have the ability to create that transaction. And I'm very happy, I'm very unhappy that we had the pandemic, but for a few years I was talking that it would take a pandemic to basically propel us, because the last pandemic propelled China in things like WeChat and Alipay. We will see that change also, and I am very hopeful that it will change the contribution that we allow all of us to do, because we like to think of work means my circle in my office, but work is all of those individuals which can contribute to making you better. And I think that for me, I don't see a need for large organization or large building of organization, because we can create those network effects whereby people are providing a service that they are themselves good at. And not only to you, it could be to 100 other people, but it gives them the ability. You don't need to have a lawyer in your midst anymore. You need to have a lawyer who's good enough, which pays attention to when you need him. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for that overview, Genevieve. We really appreciate it. We're going to go into our first question for this afternoon, which is, what impacts will digital acceleration have on inclusion and diversity? And I first want to hand that over to Adewole to give his response in regards to that.
Yes, with the remote working, now everybody's remote working. It has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. To the advantages to your question, as per on diversity, yes, it's actually very good for diversity, because now people are now working remotely, so which means that you now have the ability to reach out for talents at from anywhere. You can pull your talent from anywhere in the world, and that person is and that person is working for you. Now, I'm from a background in cloud, and I must say that apart from my bias in cloud, um, um, cloud is one of the factors that has allowed for remote working. So prior to everybody moving to cloud, you could have a situation where a company has a data center, and then they outsource that data center management to some other company, and they have different policies. Like if you're connecting to their systems from certain parts of the world, they have to, you know, come up with some kind of security architecture, or they don't even allow it in some cases. But moving to cloud, so I have a PhD in IT. Before I went into my studies, no one wanted to go into cloud. This was probably 2012. Everyone would say, no, there's no way we're going to cloud. Cloud is for the new companies. You know, the big banks were saying there's no way we're going to cloud because, you know, security is an issue. Security is an issue. But by the time I was graduating, finishing my PhD, everyone was saying, oh, I'm going to the cloud. I'm going to the cloud, because it just allows you to it allows you to reach the whole world. So you don't have your data center somewhere now. Of course, you still have your physical data center, but it's managed by a company that is specialized, or they probably even have more secure infrastructure than you as an individual company can have. That's number one. Number two, when you are in a big company and you're spending millions of pounds on servers, on renting a place for data centers, on paying security for all those things, and you know, you spend a lot. You get a network architect, a security architect. You're doing all that to kind of secure systems. Then you have big enterprise systems like SAP and all those massive kind of enterprise systems using to manage your business. Then a small guy comes on and starts his own business, offering the same service with you, but starts everything on the cloud. You realize that the cost of providing service for that small guy is way lower than all the overhead costs you as a big company have to manage. And so from there, you start to realize that those smaller companies are eating into your market, because I mean, they're providing the same level of service for you as at a much cheaper rate. I work in British Gas, so that's a typical example of what happened with British Gas. A lot of smaller companies came up, and they're providing services, and people are wondering, British Gas was the most expensive energy company, yet they weren't making as much profits because they've invested so much in large infrastructures that it cost them a lot to manage it. Now, with the entrance of cloud, everybody, even the bigger companies, are now moving to the cloud, and they're feeling this way we can. And then that opens the door for almost everyone from everywhere to be able to latch onto. And to an extent, yes, remote working allows, some form of diversity, because now you're more concerned with not necessarily, because you're not having necessarily one-on-one contact with people. Everybody's just in their own houses, doing their work. But the other side to it is the fact that for someone like me, as an architect, I kind of have a lot of interaction with business guys and the technology guys. And then you find situations where if I was in the office, I could easily walk to somebody and ask a question and gives me an answer, and I'm going on my work. But now is either that person is in one meeting or the other. So you're going to the person's calendar trying to book time, and before you know what's happening, you're at work from morning to night, and maybe from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock you are doing meetings. And but another good thing for the employers is that when we work from home, we kind of work longer hours. So that's good for the employers, not necessarily good for the workers. But yeah, for me, in terms of diversity, I see this whole thing as it's opened the minds of a lot of companies. Prior to this, okay, so we in my company now, we had a situation where we employed somebody from the US who was supposed to relocate, but right now he's actually in the US working, and that kind of opens a lot of doors to people. You can now look around the world and see where jobs are. So yeah, it's a good thing in all. You're muted, Susan.
Have you finished? Yes, okay. I would
Yeah,
now
sure.
also like to pose that same question to Kashmira to give her response.
Yeah, I'm going to actually pick up from where Genevieve, and I know, Genevieve, I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, so I apologize. I think that it's really the same thing. She used the example of hunger and poverty, and she said all the pieces are in place, and there's no reason why a farmer cannot. And I think that the same thing applies to digital acceleration and diversity and inclusion. It's as good as we want it to be. The pieces are in place, and there is critical momentum in this moment. There is a window of opportunity for all of us to do something different. And for once, start to give everybody access to equal opportunity. And so regardless of where they are in the world, as long as they're showing up with a performance level, the rest doesn't matter. And because you have now a greater acceptance of remote working, even people with physical disabilities or other limitations are now into the pool. However, I will, because I've seen the unicorn, optimism about, now digital acceleration is going to, end the conversation about diversity and inclusion. And I think it's only as good as we, as human race, want to commit to that. Is there an opportunity? Absolutely. Are the pieces in place? Absolutely. It's going to happen when we also have the human commitment. And I think that is the underlying caveat. What we make of this can become, either we all wait for it to reset to the old way and we say we are back to normal, or we could step into a new reality. And we are at that threshold. The very fact that we can have this panel discussion, which would probably not come together, were this not for the pandemic, now we have an opportunity. And the question that I want to ask is, are we going to go back into our comfortable old ways, or are we going to step forward? And that I think takes commitment, that takes integrity, and for a few good people to stand up and hold the space and nudge everybody else along. for me, that's what I think.
Just to add to that, I think the way it's going to happen is that it's like the cloud. At first, everybody was skeptical about it, and after a few years, everybody feels like if you're not on the cloud, you're missing. So it's probably going to happen that way. At first, as of last year, you would see employers actually telling people, you can only work from home 1 day a week. Some don't even allow it. Now, it's different. So it's only a matter of time. It's going to happen.
So I just actually wanted to touch on that, Adewole. So when you talked about the cloud, I know we had some discussions yesterday via WhatsApp, and I was discussing about creating my own cloud because I believe that the cloud marketplaces didn't actually offer the simplicity of onboarding. So from a non-developer, perspective, when I want to jump into the cloud, I couldn't just pick up, the products and just, insert them at the back of my solution. There was kind of like a long-winded process. And obviously the whole point of the cloud was obviously to make things easier, to make people be able to migrate to the cloud very simply. But actually the process, I think it's more the administrative process that actually still puts an obstruction against people onboarding. So if there was like a funnel that actually was able to, utilize all of the cloud services and actually funnel all of those different capabilities into a solution that connects automatically with the end user or the end customer, that would actually help to, actually make the cloud market much more greater in size, and actually obviously be more accessible.
Yeah, so I think you're going to have to start from what exactly is the need of the people. So firstly, who's your target market? What do they want? Do you understand what services do they want? And then it's quite a very, very wide, big project because there's so many services on the cloud, and a lot of times people, they give you the impression that once you get on the cloud, it's like you can do this and do everything yourself. That's just, it's not happening, and it's not going to happen. but yeah, I get your idea. Yeah, it's going to be on a case by case basis, business need.
Yes, so I obviously, I want to say Genevieve, could you unmute yourself so that I can actually say your name correctly? Because I think your name is very powerful. So how do you say it again, please?
Genevieve.
Genevieve. Oh, I love that. Yeah, so Genevieve actually touched on it earlier in regards to the amount of people that are unbanked. So there's 1.7 billion people globally unbanked. And also in regards to the startup market, it's actually a £3 trillion market. And if the startup market is a £3 trillion market, why are we not seeing that translate in our global affairs, in terms of the economy, in terms of people accessing opportunities? Because we still have that greedy pipeline that gets in the way. So those big fat giants that we talked about earlier, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Googles of the world, they tend to snatch and grab the small startups that are trying to obviously make their own way. But what if there was a way of conversion both? So you have the big giants and you have the small startups, but it was more of a thing where it was, like a recycling effect. So actually, the revenues actually go up more for the big giants, but then also the trickle-down effect is actually more prominent.
Do you think, my point of view though, is that also though, there is a lack of reward, because you have to think that who we are considering to be big giants now. So the names that you have talked about, Facebook and Amazon, at one point, they were also the startups. So in one way, there is, how do you get there? What I think that we're starting to see a bit different, and I think this access to information, to data, and ability to perform without being in an environment where you're being judged by who you are. So now I think there is an opportunity for excellence that exists. So we should see more people being able to succeed. I think the fundamental challenge for startups is needing to do everything with very few people. And that's why the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebook, which before were themselves very little, they received the funding that allowed them to grow and to then be able to have enough hands to carry everything that needs to be done. That's why I was talking about this also, this idea of a different way of working, which is to me more of it used to be a hierarchical model. Now it's more of a spoke and pull model, where I need something and I pull from there. And I don't need to bring that individual into my organization as a full-time and have to carry that cost. And instead, I'm able to use that portion. Is it 25% work that I needed from them? So that's what technology gives us. And I think that we as startup have to also start learning how to work in that way, instead of saying, I need to have somebody full-time, which does this, who does marketing. Work it out to where you bring a marketing firm or PR firm, which provides you the support that is needed. Try to also get away from this whole idea of doing retainers. That's another thing, people who do retainers and they don't do anything for you forever, but you pay them for just being there just in case. You might as well have hired someone to be part of your organization. So it's really being able to have a fair distribution of that wealth, which will then allow people to grow. And if you look, companies are actually shrinking rather than growing. GE used to be the largest employer in the world. Now GE is maybe 20,000 people. It used to be 150,000. They don't need 150,000 to be successful. And I think as long as we, one of the things that I was hearing, you were saying it's difficult to do this. If we can make technology more accessible or things much easier to do, then we don't need as much support. We can help ourselves. And when we need that support, we go for a short term, not having to worry, I must have somebody as part of my organization.
Thank you so much for that, Genevieve. I would like to bring Lubna now to the conversation, and thank you so much for patiently waiting, Lubna. So Lubna, if you could give us a 5-minute overview about the topic in question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, wow. I mean, this has been like fantastic just to be listening, and when so much has been touched on, and it's many words come to mind: trust, respect, women. If you want to think about advancing humanity, or what is the meaning of work, taxonomies, language. So it's all words and words and words. And so what did Corona do? And really Corona is an unfortunate thing, whether it was by nature or by man. But it's more about the lockdown and what the lockdown has done. And the lockdown has been for an extended period of time. And yes, the pandemic is one thing that has many ramifications, but the greater ramifications happen as a result of how we've handled it. And it is indeed an accelerator of adoption of many things, not because it made the technology any better. What it did do is, which is really fascinating about this particular lockdown and this pandemic. It is a pandemic, but it is truly global. And now, for the first time in human history, regardless of your ethnic background, your where you are, who you are, what you are, or what level of education or anything, you're all facing the same thing. And if you're speaking or communicating, you're talking about the same thing. And if you're locked down anywhere you are, your circumstance is now heightened in one way or the other. And the choices you've made and what we valued and everything. And then when you stop back and you see what that has exposed, it accelerated so much, video telephony, for example, and this, like what we're doing right now, has been available. Video conferencing, we've been as a technology innovation, I remember pushing it in the very early 90s, trying to convince companies that we could do that and set up multimedia conference rooms and the wireless industry desperately tried to push video telephony and the telecoms before that. And to your point about swinging between in the cloud and not, I'm old enough to remember who needs a 256K memory? Nobody's gonna ever need a computer in their house, and who would need a .com? And so it's human nature. So what I'm getting to is this is the first time we're all talking about the same thing, and this is the first time we've just like hit a wall together at the same time, and now everything we know also at the same time, the political situation and economic situation, the disparity everywhere has been, the blinders have been fallen off. I mean, we've had blinders all along that the systems that we have put in place to govern us, to accelerate us, that we've trusted and pledged allegiance to, and just entrusted blindly because in what they'll do for us, have failed. But we've known that they have been failing us across the board. All of them, whether it's political, economic, whether it's social, science, I mean, sorry, not science, but I meant to say religion, everything, really, all of the social constructs. And to your point, we've all stacked ourselves up and down. We don't look at each other like this. We look at each other either up or down. Even sometimes be grateful you're much better off than so many others. Oh, it's like, it's okay for so many others to be, or, oh, up there. And how are we measuring it? By how many digits we accumulate? It's not even real money. I don't care if it's crypto or cash. It isn't real, dude. It's a promise for value. So it's a promise of a value. So it's really a trust in those who provided you with, who made the promise, whether it's your government or the crypto tech. So this is a huge opportunity to reset, and we have two extremes to talk about the two extremes. We continue on the trajectory that mankind has demonstrated, and I don't want, you have to warn me when it's my time, or we pull to accept the reality for where we are and become more aware of who we are and what we want. Because if the lockdown also showed us anything else, it's the things we crave the most. Money could not buy, none of it.
Absolutely.
Let me hold you, you know? Let me feel the water. Let me feel the sand at like my feet. None of it cost anything. And the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and you could hear yourself think. So it's, in many ways, life is a matter of perception and response to any set of circumstance, I say. And this is an opportunity for us. That's why I say this binary shift, you know, it's as simple as that. How do you change the world? Like Michael Jackson said it, you know, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. So we have to do that individual at an individual, and then our value, talk about work. It's really not about the work. Who cares? If we can get the machines to do all the work and we're all chilling, then work becomes, how do we nurture each other? How do we want to compete? Let's compete on innovating. How do we evolve as a conscience? How do we create a field of effect in the omniverse that we are existing in, that has a resonance of oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin flowing instead of suffering and fear and pain? Like, really? But to get there, it will take the love of a mother and a lot more women and that nurturing, that feminine energy. It is not to exclude others, of course, but it is to say that is really important. And then we talk about that diversity, but what are we? If you know, erase our colors and our tongue and languages and all these constructs that are stacked up and down rather than horizontal, they're nothing. man-made ideas. And all we need to do, and I just lost my chain of thought right away, is to just, if we do that shift to thinking of ourselves rather than a humankind, but a kind human, and sort of immediately you can just feel the difference. If you ask yourself, am I a humankind or am I a kind human?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lubna, for that very interesting spiel that you gave us. I actually wanted to touch on the fact that also we realized during the lockdown that obviously who are the key workers, right? Who are the most, important people in society? And actually the most important people in society are the most underpaid. So that's another, thing that, people have to question, that, when everything goes, bellies up, actually, at the end of the day, it's not the big, the big buildings or the big infrastructures that actually helped her. It was actually, the average person.
And that's why we need to make a shift in thinking. If it's about, we devalued what is important. I say it's like playing a game of tennis or anything that has a ball. You say you keep your eye on the ball and you'll play a decent game. And in life, somehow, and for the benefit of the few that are fueled by greed, we've shifted our focus and we're social engineering ourselves to focus on the money being the ball. And then if you're playing tennis and quality of life is the tennis racket, and it's no wonder the quality of our lives are getting hammered, while some people's tennis balls or money are getting bigger and bigger. And we just need to shift. It's really seriously a binary shift. Anybody who's a geek would know, turn 1 to a 0 and the whole thing is new.
Thank you, Lubna. I think Kashmira wanted to touch on that.
I so full body resonate with everything that Lubna said. It's really important because you started this conversation with this question with diversity and inclusion, that, as we speak on this panel, there are those who are voiceless, who were also affected by this pandemic. And in two ways, where the ball is the money, and that's because they are playing a game. I'm for sure I sit on layers of privilege, but I do come from India. And so I do know that there are many for whom the experience of the pandemic was very different. So it was not one experience. Oh, no. And I think that when we go, to pick up from what Genevieve said about, us pulling services and shrinking organizations, there will be a group of people in emerging economies who will also once again be kept out of the conversation because they don't know how to be those remote resources. They need the structure, they need a physical place to show up for work because they live in a place where there are 8 people in a room, and they need to go to work to be productive, and they need to leave the living space is just barely, if anything, livable. So I think that it's only fair for us to also recognize that, of course, absolutely, organizations need to shrink. We need to pull resources. We also owe a group of people who live all over the world support in terms of training and in terms of other different infrastructure so that they can come to the playing field. Because otherwise, we are once again going to exclude them.
Well, that's exactly my point. I mean, the systems we have in place have to be completely redone. So it's not about putting another Band-Aid like traditionally we do with all systems, at least IT system, or even regulatory. I mean, we need a complete reset, and we know it. And so the idea becomes, it's not about right now the distribution of profits, and even if these companies are worth the money they're making, or the celebrities, what have the celebrities done for us lately? I don't see why a CEO should be making that kind of money when the janitor is having to work multiple jobs, when the most valuable, in my opinion, the one that needs the most respect, are those that make life livable. and that enable us to be able to be our best. And so we need to shift the way we reward things, each other. And we need to change our mindset about work. It's really not about work, it's about life. It's about living. We don't live to work. We've been trained to live to work and to consume and sell our soul so we can buy it again, in the hope that we can buy it again.
Exactly. So we're going to move into our second question. So our second question today is, how will the gig economy and talent match supply to demand on an ad hoc basis? And if so, how do we create a framework that is inclusive? I actually want to first get Genevieve to respond. I hope I did better this time.
Yeah, you're getting better. You get a few more time. I think that we have not been aware of a trend which is happening. The millennials and the Gen X more are actually not staying in those jobs for 30 years. They're barely staying on average for 18 months. So the gig economy is more than alive. It is a reality. And so it's not, people do not feel a need to have, you no longer are looking for a pension or for growth through the same organization forever. What is, however, needed is, it's actually going to get better, because now most people don't even want, like, I don't know how many friends have actually told me, oh yeah, I'm going to be in Bali, or I'm going to this place, and I'm going to be working from there. That doesn't make them less accountable or less productive. So what that needs to happen then is a social contract between the individual who is doing the work and the person who's hiring, to agree as to what are deliverables. So it's no longer based on time, it's based on deliverable and effort that is needed. So each needs to agree to that contract and then be able to perform on that. So in ways, the gig economy is going to be better, but I wonder, the next thing is, what is the communication tools and how do you actually get yourself on top? Because sometimes you'll have, I've hired people who are brilliant, but we're not the best communicators, but they did great work and they were very conscientious. So we need to have a mechanism, and this is where, I'm not planning on doing it because I keep to my space. You could say a blockchain technology for providing trust in that what I say about someone is the truth, and you're not gamifying it like it's done in, and this is the problem sometimes with these Fivers, is you get all your friends to go in and say how great you were, but I don't know that's your friend, and I hired this person based on reputation. So how do you measure based on reputation and output? Because if I give somebody a recommendation for doing a great job, hopefully that is going to be something that helps propels them. So we need to start looking, and mostly I think this is what this whole pandemic is bringing to light. How do you assure that the talent can be found, can be trusted to be the talent, and how do you now have this relationship, which is, I don't need to see you to know you're doing the work. I just need to see the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so I want to, if I
Sorry, Lubna, before you touch on it, I just want to bring Adewole into there, because I think that he also would have something to say in regards to that. Adewole, are you with us? I think you need to
Okay, so I think one area that we need to also think about is so this can work in many ways. So what area we need to think about is what are the existing inter-country rules in terms of employment. So for instance, if I'm going to employ somebody from maybe someone in India, for instance, and remote, is the person going to be expected to, how knowledgeable are people about the tax rules and tax laws that exist? Is the person going to pay tax there? I'm going to somehow declare that on paying that person. That's one way to look at it. Another way to think about it is when you now have smaller companies in India, for instance, and they are unable to employ their own citizens because that's like the negative part to it. They can't employ their citizens because majority of their people are employed by companies, the bigger companies. Another thing to think about. So I don't have the answers. I'm just giving things to think. Another thing to think about is you have situations in advanced countries where they start to say that, oh, immigration, or maybe people have taken their jobs and we don't have jobs, and people will start to revolt after a while. It's not just as straightforward as, I'm just thinking that, I'm just saying that we need to think about these things too. It's going to raise certain questions or certain I don't know, some people would definitely revolt against it, even though we are trying to be, inclusive. I know Kashmir said something earlier on, and that was actually very, very key for me during the pandemic. There was a time when you would go into the store over here and you had the money to buy something, and that thing was just not available, and you, particularly eggs. I like eggs, so I was always going to buy egg. And by the time you get to the store, there's no egg. You have the money, there's no egg, and this just tells you how important the chickens are. And if the chickens are that important, then what about the people who are taking care of the chickens? What about the van driver who's going to drive it? And those guys always had to go to work so that we can work remotely. So, um, as we are opening the door and making it the jobs accessible to everybody, some people are going to revolt against it because they'll start thinking, oh, okay, how come I'm based in the UK, I don't have a job, and so many jobs are out there for UK companies. It's just something that we need to think about. I don't know how to convince the whole world that, yeah.
Yeah.
Lubna, I know you want to
I think to his point, I think the change needs to happen. Well, the good news is technology, there's more than sufficient technology. I mean, AI has been bubbling for a long time, and it plays a very, very big role. And distributed ledger and distributed technology at large, and particularly distributed ledger technology, and models like what Genevieve has put in place, and is putting a real life use case that is addressing a supply chain, a particular supply chain, but the problems that she's brilliantly solving are addressing the chokeholds and the transparency and traceability in supply chain and in the delivery of a product or a service. And then tokenizing the work. So when the work unit is tokenized and you as an individual, well, let me just back up before the role of an individual. But so from a technology point of view, we have sufficient technology and is being demonstrated. It is now about innovation and implementation, and how do we take the different aspects of technology that we have today, and it's across the board, up and down the stack, which is what's really happening here, and where you need to ensure trust and the same transparency that we need across the value chain in delivering services into a sector or out of a sector or across any particular field. You also, technology itself is a stack which is an ecosystem in itself. And even each layer from the chipsets to the application providers. So there's plenty of journals, but there's policy, and there's a new policy that has to come into place. There's governments have a role, but we have to re-examine. So we have to question all of the systems that we have in place. We have technology to implement new governance and new policies and new frameworks that support a horizontal wealth-enabled creation and I believe it has to be through social entrepreneurship and enablement of hyper-local economies that have global markets and have global strategies, but it's hyper-local implemented and hyper-local sensitive. And where global comes, where you are sharing culture, where you're sharing learning. So in areas of education, of collaboration on science and advancement. So what work you do changes. And we all know that and it's being demonstrated, new cities are going to be popping up all over the place, because in fact, you really don't have to be in one particular place. You can be whatever you really want to be. And as you tokenize the work and you can, when you start diversifying across the board, and I mean, and it comes across the board, up and down the stack, because it's systemic. And we are a system of systems. Nature is a system of systems. So if you think of it that way, there's a place for all of that. But look at what Genevieve has done, because it can be applied across anything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Lubna. I just want to go into our interactive session. Sorry, would you like to touch on it?
Well, I just wanted to add that you know, for everyone that is every job specification, so to speak, you have deliverables, and those deliverables are measurable, and so it starts from the top, saying what is your expectation of this job or of this person, and what's the deliverable. And so that way you can actually measure the input of an individual to your work task. Yeah, that's what I was going to add.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Adewole. Now we're going to go to our interactive session. So I don't know if you have the Newny platform open, but you can see it on screen now. So I can see that we have some votes in regards to the questions. And I think the one at the top is, are there any tools available that you would recommend for a small or macro business that will keep them accessible, i.e., e.g., overcoming language barriers, being able to use new tech? And I think I'll first hand that over to Adewole to answer, and then maybe if Lubna could come in.
Okay, so in terms of accessibility, so obviously we are talking now via Zoom. So it's webinar tools. I mean, because of COVID now, Zoom has become so popular. Everyone is either using Zoom or Teams, and that way, the language barrier, I think, will always be there. Again, if I'm based in the UK and I'm speaking English and I want to employ somebody, I would expect that I should be able to get on the Zoom or whatever and speak to the person. I wouldn't be expecting to have a translator, except perhaps somebody can come up with a technology that translates, so you can just click on something and say, okay, translate this to whatever. It's not impossible. It's something that can come on. At the moment, I'm not aware of any of those tools, but I mean, something that can come out of this. I'm sure people will be working on something like that now. In terms of Office 365, Microsoft Teams, they are collaborative tools where, you know, two or more people, even Google Docs, people can be working on a particular tool at the same time. Same thing with the cloud. You know, you can be spinning up a server on cloud while somebody is checking it on the other side, saying that it has all the tools. So yeah, definitely those tools are coming up and they are available. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Lubna.
Yeah, I mean, there are many tools that are available for free, from several that you already mentioned, and then you have things like Slack, you have things like even WhatsApp. It's depending on what it is that you're trying to do. There are a simple search would give you. There's Airtable. I mean, I could just keep listing, but you can just, depending on where in the process you're at or what you need, a simple search would give you that. But you can check out surely Slack or Trello or things like that. And then also another thing that I think would be very important is to look at innovation grants and different grants that are and calls for participation and hackathons that you could involve yourself in. where you could find yourself with a lot of tools. And then the other thing, depending on your business, is incubators and accelerators and events like where that Suzanne here is doing so kindly.
Thank you, Lubna. Genevieve?
Yeah, so I was going to suggest, so one of, I think Lubna was right, looking at different tools such as Slack. For me, I'm going to tell you, I'm a very big advocate of Microsoft. Microsoft is about $3 per user, gives you access to Teams, SharePoint, and on the web, the Word and Excel and those tools. I was very upset a few weeks ago when I had to go to Airtable. One of the things is that obviously being able to contain, because what I'm hearing from this person is also accessibility and also keeping track of where you have your data is key. And for me, I've found Google to be a bit difficult from a security standpoint in being able to keep access to my property. And that's why I like Microsoft. But I think that it's important as part of your organization to understand what are the tools you're going to use, and also clearly have mechanism for onboarding and offboarding people who are working with you, and understanding how you can share with them. I think if you have Teams, if you have Microsoft, you have Teams, which means you no longer need to have Zoom, which means you have no limitation in your ability to run meetings. So you really should be asking, what kind of work are you doing? What are the tools that you need to have? Slack, I like to some level, but at some point your data, if you don't pay them and the price is actually high for it, you don't have access to your history. So all those things are, you may not think about it like first year, I don't really need that data, but if all your data is sitting on Slack and you're now not going to have access to it, because you don't want to pay a per person fee. So it's important to think about where you need. And then in terms of language barrier, I think that my point of view is Google Translate is fabulous. Just put it in, smack it in, and you get that. We are so much better now than we used to be. So you can actually I use WeChat on a regular basis, and people are talking Chinese and I'm reading in English. So we're not as limited as we used to be. And so we just need to embrace, and then Lubna say, it's really search and community like yours are great for people to come in and ask those questions and get the direction or support that is necessary.
My question, the last question for today is, what are your opinions on productive softwares, and could this create a bad culture of micromanagement? And I'm just pointing that to any panelist that would like to respond to that question.
I think that this is not about the social, this is totally against the social contract. This is going back to basically time card in and time card out, which means if you're micromanaging someone to understand how busy they are they on their computer, and those software are intrusive and they're tantamount to actually spying. I didn't do well when my boss was on top of my head. I did better when I was free to do what was necessary. I mean, joke was 20 years ago when I was working at the bank, we didn't have anything to do really. So we went to the movies and we came back and we were refreshed. My boss didn't say anything, because when I needed to be there until 1 o'clock in the morning to get something done, I took it upon myself to do so. And that's where we need people. We need to be able to give them the ability to know what is to be delivered, so which goes back to trust. If you trust somebody and you get them to understand what is necessary to make both the company and themselves successful, then you don't need to be watching over them, because if you're watching over them, they won't do anything. They just pretend.
The cover CYA. It is exactly when, how I started my whole, when you started talking, I talked about trust and respect. And I think we've set up lots of constructs to to enable fair exchange, because we don't trust each other. We have so many lawyers. I mean, we have more lawyers than anything else in this world for a reason, and our courts are overloaded. So we need to make that shift. And until we make that mental shift, any productivity tool, or any tool for that matter, can be used in one way or the other. It's about the biases in the data, or the biases in the people using it, and that's where the change needs to happen.
Kashmira?
Yeah, and again, I think I'm going to add to this. I think that, well, I live in a world, especially in IT and ITE services, where productivity software are very prevalent, and I think that it is a way for companies to avoid the difficult conversation, what Genevieve calls a social contract. It's about saying that, yes, my workforce is young, and hence they may not be trusted to have the maturity today to understand that they are being paid for completing so much work. So one easy way is to say, well, we're just going to track you, and we're going to destroy that trust, or we're going to make the harder and the longer effort in saying, we're going to have a conversation with you where you understand that we are empowering you, we are trusting you. And then I think, like Genevieve said, what you come back with is manifold, and probably would be very beneficial to companies, and would probably transform the life of that person who is being tracked forever, because you are giving them the gift of trust. And I think human beings respond to being trusted. I think they show up in their best selves. So I think this is an opportunity for organizations not to take shortcuts, and to notice that this is a time to invest in the people, whether they are your employees or your contractors. Have a conversation, establish the social contract. That's what I think.
One of the things I was going to add to that, also because of the gig economy, this is about loving your alumni. So if you mistreat the people who come in, once you need those resources, they won't come back to you. So if you start accepting that they will probably go away, but if you make that agreement, then there is a bond, and they will come back and work for you.
Absolutely. I was just saying about incentivizing people to work, which would create more value. So when people work hard, it's because they feel that they're valued, and not actually about the amount of money that they're getting paid. It's more about feeling like you are part of something than actually just, one in many. So I think it's really important to incentivize people based on participation and based on their efforts, so that they can bring more value. So I'd like to wrap up our session today, and I would like to first just bring Mukta back into the fold and say thank you for letting us come onto a Newny platform. And obviously, whoever would like to connect with Mukta to do their events, please do so. Also, I'd like to say thank you to all our speakers this afternoon. You've been absolutely amazing, and I really appreciate your commitment. So have a good afternoon, and take care. And thank you to all our attendees. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.